Well, then you can ask them, maybe, is there something like this? Jake, can you think of any negative consequences that this belief might have? You can, well, I think one thing is, that's why there's a number of them. What you can also do is to start asking questions, maybe to deal with this. For example, you can say, well, what does this mean to you? Or what other things are like this? Or what causes this? In other words, if you're at a loss of words for what is initially said there, then you can either meta-model it or you can start tracking it back further or something like that. So in other words, till something does spring to mind. And that's a good question, and it's an important strategy to be able to have. Because if somebody says something and it doesn't give you groundwork with which to start from, you might want to have some ways of tracking it to other statements that give you more leverage or more flexibility. Is there any examples of things? Like, for example, what was there one that...
Well, someone in my group, 2 people in my group had thing about being disorganized. So you gave him that one answer, and then it was like you didn't want to repeat the same thing. So there was one, and then the other person, that was the second thing. By the time it came down my turn to say something, it was like the third thing you could say. And I'm like, okay, be quick. And I was running out of things to say.
It's just because you're disorganized.
No.
That's the problem. That's what it is. It's not that you couldn't think of something to say, it's just that you're so organized that... Right.
I was so organized I couldn't possibly imagine you not being organized.
Right. But see, that's another one. You could say it's not that you're disorganized, it's just that you're creative with your organization. Write that one down. Yeah, so I'm also curious. I know that while a lot of folks typically use NLP in therapeutic situations, I would really like to emphasize other kinds of things that come up in terms of, say, business issues or health issues or that kind of thing. So I'm also curious as to what kind of belief statements or beliefs came up, or did anybody have any around business, doing business, that kind of thing. I think certainly when you are working in a business context, you are going to be brushing up against beliefs in yourself and in other people all the time. And certainly one of the things that I have found in successful business people is that one thing that characterizes all of them is it's not that everybody shares a certain management style or even a particular organizational strategy. One thing they all share is that they believe in themselves and believe in what they're doing. And I think that probably is an important place to start. It's as important as any other thing that you could do in setting up a successful business. So I was curious if any came up around that. It could relate to success, it could relate to kind of things.
I kind of have one that if I desire something, then I usually get it. And
so
if I meet somebody and I know that maybe way down the road that they could get me to other people or what have you, and I kind of logged it in the back of my mind, then something transpires, and I usually end up seeing them more often or what have you, that all of a sudden get what I ultimately want. If you need my help, let me know. If you need to get connected with finance or whatever, let me know.
That's an interesting, I think that's a good, interesting general belief. If I want something, I will eventually get it. That doesn't necessarily mean right now or tomorrow.
It just means that I take the steps to
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
And what I run into a lot is that success is not something that happens to you, it's something that you go out.
So the limitation being that success is something that you have to make for yourself, or the limitation being that, well, success is something that just happens to you. I can see either one could create a problem. If you think I have to be a self-made success, and you don't let other people participate in that, or you don't let the environment around you determine some elements of that, then you could get yourself stuck. And on the other hand, if you say, well, success is just something that happens to me, so I don't have to participate in it, that on that environmental logical level that we were talking about could also be kind of a limitation. Does it happen both ways in the situations you deal with, or primarily in one way?
I would say the latter. In the type of business that we're in, they're generally comprised of people who go out and make things happen.
Uh-huh.
And the other kind, of course, is that life is not a lottery.
Yeah.
You don't just wait around.
So one thing would be, how would you go about then dealing with beliefs that where somebody would say, well, success is something that just happens to you, so I'm just sitting around and waiting and I'm not going to be doing the things that could promote that. Yeah. Or people saying, well, I have to do something now because if I don't do it right away, then, if I don't personally, grab success by the shoulders and, bring it right to me, then I never have a chance of getting it. So one of the things you could do is, be interesting to see how could you go about sleight of mouthing, shall we say, those beliefs. And the question would be, and here's where I'd also like you to start thinking, what belief do you want to lead to? That's really the question. And before I know exactly how I want to sleight of mouth that, I have to know, well, what is the belief I want them to have? Because that's going to allow me to start to go from my problem belief to some kind of a more empowering, or you could say, could be more empowering, it could be stress reducing, whatever, but the desired belief. What would be an appropriate belief for people to have, for example, in your situation? Do you know what would be?
It strings along, because the thing that we run into at the end is that it's not even just this, it's a matter of then what is success? And success then becomes this, it's always one step further than where you are, and so I think then you have to ask yourself, well, then what is success and why is that success? And I think then you might come back around to.
Yeah, so I hear you could do a lot of stuff there with redefinitions of success. So the belief changes, it would seem to me, would be around what's success, because you could say, well, it doesn't sound to me like you're talking about succeeding. It sounds to me like you're talking about comparing yourself to somebody else. That's not succeeding, that's comparing. And that could be. If somebody's always going, well, I always need to be one step ahead of myself. You could redefine it and saying that's not success. That's just trying to second guess yourself, which again could put it into a different frame for people to think about. Yeah.
I think it'd be a good idea to find a deep structure definition of what success is.
Well, that's an interesting thing. He says, because here, we might as well address this for a moment. We're bringing in the concept of deep structure. So, deep structure, in a meta model, you have surface structure, and then there's a bunch of transitions. You finally get to deep structure. And whenever you're dealing with language, surface structure is typically the statement that somebody makes, which is not necessarily the deep meaning that it has. And one of the